Hey everyone, and welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. If you have been here before, welcome back. If you are new, welcome. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have lots of laughs along the way. And when we say besties, we mean that in absolutely every way. We talk all the time, and this podcast literally emerged out of our friendship and our sort of like mutual, we both are working as editors and we're always talking about books, and thus this podcast was born, in case you were looking for a quick history lesson of the Story Deep Dive podcast. So this week we're introducing this month's book, which is Sin and Chocolate by K.F. Breene. So we're going to be getting into sort of some of the high level stuff of what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks and kind of warming you all into this book and the weeks to come. But before we do that, I got to check in with Dana over at Dane Details. So Dana, what do you got going on in your life over there?
Ma'am, listen, y'all, she didn't toss it over to me, and I thought we was going to toss it over to her, and that is how it's...
Well, I can't toss it to myself. That would be juggling. So I had to go somewhere, and it had to be back to you.
Let's see. Okie dokie. Real quick, because I can't wait. Listen, y'all, I can't wait till we talk about what Rachel's going to talk about. So what do I want to talk about? Y'all, your girl over here getting it, okay? You know what? Quite honestly, I feel like I am in some sort of... Okay, wait. Yeah, I'm going to back up. I was watching Terminator the other night. Husband's
my favorite way to start a story.
And it was the one where they were time traveling a little bit, and I feel like that's the way my mind and my body feels with all this traveling here lately, and then doing so much traveling in the middle of big projects, because they already feel like you're in this like altered time state. So listen, my brain is tired, but what I can say is that I'm loving life. I'm getting it in. I'm drinking my water, and I'm minding my business, because apparently that is all you can do when you're tired. It is all you can do. But real talk, like I've been having a lot of fun of looking at students having these wins here lately. That are just there. It's not that they're abnormal, but it's just seeing that when you have a community, you're watching people progress almost in real time. Most of my clients are usually, I have a handful that are regular where we meet several times a month, but many of them, they come, we work, they go. They come, we work, they go. But to see people consistently week after week after week after week, and then you're starting to see things unfold, it has been really, really amazing to see, and just feeling, listen, I had a lady, one of my students, submit her blurb. I didn't have nothing to say. She said, Dana, I said, ma'am, you did not come to play. I have nothing to say but put an italicized on that word right there, because baby, she killed it. And so awesome. To think, it really is, to think about her evolution as a writer and her blurb writing, and to now know she is a beast at writing blurbs. I mean, a beast. And how you can see her niche evolving and really settling into her own like little like fantasy / steamy / action. Like, it's just, I'm just, listen, I have a lot of proud mama moments. And so that has probably been the biggest thing that has rose to the top. And so now, as we move forward with having the Addictive Romance blueprint out in the world, and sort of getting all these things together and getting the live episodes recorded, it's going to be interesting to watch these students really take this and implement this. And so, I just feel like it's a very interesting place to be in as a coach and as an instructor. And it also makes me feel very, very blessed and really excited for them, and really excited to be able to watch them from the sidelines, right? It's like, hey, clap it up, clap it up, clap it up. And then the final thing I'm going to say before I toss it over to Rachel, okay, y'all know your girl's over here. Okay, so I am... I'm auditing her community. Listen.
Hell yeah.
I'm gonna be the worst student ever on this particular thing because I still don't know what story I'm gonna write. However, why did my designer deliver the covers today?
Wait, the revised ones or different? Ooh.
And why are they so freaking good, Rachel?
Okay, so I left this in a message for you offline, but it was so funny to me because the original design on one of them there were snakes on it, and you're like, ooh, that one, no, like that's not the right vibe. Meanwhile, I was like, oh, that one with the snakes rules so hard.
I knew you would.
I was like, that's how you know they were the wrong cover because they were sending the wrong message to the wrong person.
Listen, I said when Rachel sees this, she's gonna pick it. I know she's gonna like it. Now the revision is totally me. So when you see it, but yes, I gave him all the cover stuff. And y'all listen, I decided for Rachel's thing, I think I am. God, I just told you I don't know. I think I'm gonna work on a series that or a saga that I've been wanting to do for years. Like I'm talking about probably over 10 years. And I already started having stuff, and I had some sort of covers, and I have some blurbs, and I sort of have some of the things, but when I looked at them I was like, man, I want to make them a little bit more like edgy, and so I sent them to my designer, and I have the covers, and it just, again, I thought, this is the tip before I pass it over to Rachel. I think one of the things that I find of when you're working and you have a little moments of inspiration that you can pull on, one of my things is having a cover. Once I have the story and I know the title, like having a cover is almost like memorializing that thing, like, okay, here's what we're doing. It's the same thing of why I really encourage my clients to write their blurb before they write their story, right? Because it's one of those things of like having a capsule of what you were aiming to accomplish with the story already written. You can always adjust and edit. And so to see these covers, this is probably the 4th edition of them, but really like nailed in. So after you did your lesson and I thought about it, I worked through it and redid the titles and reworked some of those elements that I knew I wanted to do. And so, yeah, so I'll be showing them to you.
I'm so excited because you, it sounds like you're coming back around to maybe working on this particular project because you sort of were like, you started there and then you're like, ooh, I might do this one. It sounds like you're maybe coming back around to the one that you sort of started with.
I decided that because of the amount of time that we have, that even if I just walk away with having my covers, my blurbs, and all of my plots done, I'd still be like way ahead of what I thought before. So that's where I am right now. Girl, when you ask me next week, it might be something different.
I'll be sure to ask next week so that way I can check it and find out.
That's what's fun about it, right? So I'm making progress. So my goal is to this week start plotting again.
Amazing.
And get back into the world building, and I've already written some other books in that world to know. And so I've been going back and reading the other books that I wrote, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm ready. So
Yay!
Who knows, girl? I may plot the first one and be like, I'm writing. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited. So with that said, that was my messy rendition of what I have going on at Danger Tales and in my writing life. What about you, Rachel? Speaking of writing.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first, let me just tell y'all. So, while we're recording, God bless him, my poor husband, he's trying to fix our fridge right now. And so there's like a part that needs to be replaced, and our fridge happens to be like, we're due for a grocery run, so it's a bit emptier than like usual because we're about to fill it back up, and he's like, now's a really good time. So there's some clattering happening in the background, so if you're hearing that in the background, my mic is picking it up something awful. I apologize, but also he's over there making my fridge work better, so
come on,
it leaks really bad.
Come on, Abby.
It's ridiculous. So anyway,
wait, is he handy?
I would say so. Yeah, like he hasn't had occasion to do a lot of these things, but like he will like look it up, watch a tutorial, and then like get in there and do it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And so it's been anyway, our fridge has been leaking for like a hot minute. He knows exactly what the problem is. We had to buy the part. And so he's over there and he's getting it in. So, but you can hear the clattering. I had a text from him that was like, I'm trying to be quiet, I promise. So I just wanted to, so you hear banging around in the background. It's just Trevor's out there being my hero, you know?
Come on.
So yes, okay. So besides getting our fridge fixed, so it's funny because by the time this comes out, I should be nearly done or finished with my first draft, right? Like I should be just about finished. At the time of this recording, because we're a little bit prior to that, I am in my drafting blitz right now. So, so we finished outlining, I taught through the outlining, and it's been amazing because right now, so, I'm always about a half step ahead of my students so that I can do the thing, teach it, do the thing, teach it. And so I'm watching my students' stories come together. So seeing those wins, right, build up and watching them see their own stories coming together in their outlines and getting excited about them. And so we're going to be this month then springboarding into drafting, doing our first draft. So I am working on a first draft of my novella, and I am on a very tight deadline. So this week I am going to be pretty much every morning, like I'm going to be sitting down. The first thing I'm doing for the day is going to be writing. So, like I said, by the time this comes out, I should be nearly done. At this time, I have finished chapter 2. So we are, it's honestly for me, the beginning, and this, I've seen this to be true. I've watched it happen for you. I've seen it with my writers. The beginning is just really hard to write. Like it takes time to like warm into the story. Even if you know what needs to happen, but then you still have to like get into the thing. So those early chapters are the ones that they take longer. You're kind of seeing, especially for me, I'm seeing, it's taking me longer to produce fewer words because you're still just, your story hasn't built the momentum just yet. Like you don't have your sort of momentum of being in the world. But even between chapter 1 and chapter 2, I've seen such a huge difference between like chapter 1 was like, it took me forever to just like get through the events and like get it on the page and be like, okay, like this is the stuff that needs to happen. But then chapter 2 came a lot more easily, and it was like, oh yeah, okay, this is what needs to happen. Like this is sort of, like what, and it feels a little bit more like my writing versus, chapter 1 felt very stilted of like
like you're trying to force it,
drag words out, but knowing that like they have to get on the page before, especially for me, before I can move on, like I have to do things linearly. Like I can't, some people are able to like, ooh, go write, a scene in the middle if that's the one that's coming to you. My brain will not do it. My brain is like, no, we start at beginning and we write through in order till we get to the end. Like there's only one way to do it, and that is like my brain like draws a hard line on it. But yeah, so I'll be going in every single morning this morning and just working through and getting those chapters, getting those first draft chapters in, and yeah, it's a good thing I've started my work. I've been starting my work day at 6:30 in the morning, which has been really helpful for getting like those good morning hours where like your best work, or for me, my best work kind of comes out my first morning hours. So that's been helping, but yeah, that's what we're doing. I'm writing the first draft of my novella, which is
okay.
bonkers.
So this is chapter 2 of how many chapters do you have plotted?
So I have 12 chapters.
Oh,
there's 4 acts, 3. Yeah. So 12 chapters plotted. My expectation is that it'll be, by the end of it, it'll be like 12 longer chapters to kind of like fill in the novella, because there's sort of like multiple layers of like events and things. You're combining stuff to stay inside those tight constraints. But I've wound up with about 12 chapters, so my novella should be clocking in. If I had to guess,
30,000.
Say again.
Around 30,000.
That's kind of, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
My first draft will probably be more like 20, 25. Because what I'm finding is that in the drafting, my scenes are very short because I'm really just I'm writing through the events happening, and they can be fairly sparse, of just like, we're getting from point A to point B. So there's not a lot of prose. There's dialogue, but it's just sort of loose dialogue to kind of like fill in, here's where we need to go. So yeah, I expect probably if I come in around 30,000 words, that's where I'm expecting the final draft to wind up. First draft,
are you doing
around 20,000.
Are you doing all manual or are you doing some dictation?
I'm doing all manual. I don't have a good, I've not done a lot of dictation. I haven't tried, and I know that you kind of, like, dictation is surprisingly, like, in theory, it seems like, oh yeah, you just, like, dictate. But actually, like, there's, like, some methods, right, to doing it and really making it work. And I have no earthly clue about how to really do dictation. So yeah, it's just me sitting down. I'll usually handwrite to start with, to, like, warm in and say, okay, like, what are you writing today? Where did we leave off? What's supposed to be happening in the scene? What are the emotions that are happening in the scene? Just to kind of get my head and, like, what's happening, so that I can show up to the page. And usually I'll give myself, like, a little bullet outline of, like, okay, here's what I know right now. So I can kind of just have some touch points to write off of. So yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, y'all, listen, because I know my students be listening. Yeah, this is where we talk about doing a scene brief, right? Like being able to sit down and look at your chapter and sort of ground yourself and having anywhere to 10 to 14, like, bullet points, like light little things of, like, what's supposed to be going on, even if it's just the progression to warm you up and to kind of get your mind rolling. And so your brain is almost like jumping at the bit to kind of get going. Yeah. Then you kind of just dive in there and you sort of have, it's almost like you have a roadmap.
Yeah. And I kind of have my students split up the way that they do those. So they'll do part of it during the outlining phase, where it's like, just sort of like map out generally what you think needs to happen in the scene, right? Like, what the scene is about, you kind of have that summary, and then map out generally what you sort of are imagining happens in this scene, and some of those, like, high level points of, like, point A to B, C, so you get maybe 5 to 7 bullet points maybe. And then when you're drafting, once you're closer to the story, then you can come up with something a little more detailed and add more bullet points and have a clearer sense of, on the ground, all the stuff you want to happen at the scene. So you get that next level of granularity when you're closer to the story, rather than looking at it from 20,000 feet or whatever in your outline level. So I kind of have it broken up to make that, to give them as much to start with as they can, but also to manage it as much as possible, knowing that at that high level view early in the process, it can be really hard to see then scale down into the details. So that's kind of how I'm sort of teaching that. So that's kind of, I think, the overlap between the way that you kind of teach it and the way I teach it as well.
Yeah, I guess because we don't do as many passes, but at the same time, I'll go through and do, like, have the skeleton, and then almost have, like, the shorter outline at first, so that when I'm going back and I'm doing my scene briefs, it is the second pass. Like, I've already gone from top to bottom, so that I'm adding in things like subplots and other little details and, like, pieces of dialogue that's sticking in my head that I want to capture and not forget, and things like that. So yeah, awesome. How are you feeling?
I feel really good. Like, I'm excited. It's a little wild to be like, oh, like, I'm doing this now. Again, we've talked about this before, that it's like, I knew that it was on hold for me. There was other things that, needed to be taken care of, and there's stuff between me and myself and my creative life and journey that I needed to work out before I was ready to take on a project. So the fact that it's happening now is like, oh man, like, I sit down to write, and it's weird because it's like, I sit down to write and it feels very normal, even though it's like, you're finally doing the thing, Rachel. But it's just me sitting at my computer, staring at my screen and, like, typing, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's almost like a mismatch between, like, this feels like a big deal and it's amazing, but the actual thing itself is, like, very ordinary, of, like, it's just me, like, clicking away at my computer. But I'm having a time, and I'm finding that I have a better mind for comedy than drama. And so, like where my imagination really kicks in is, like, when I'm coming up with, like, the funny, quirky details and, like, the sort of, like, weird stuff, versus, like, it's just, like, the story overall is much more sort of lighthearted and funny, even though I love, again, we know I love Ninth House, I love gritty, like, kind of stories, but, like, my stuff, at least this story, right, it's just very, like, it's very light. You're meant to kind of just like laugh at it a little bit. It's very much more cozy than traditional crime. And I discovered that very quickly in the plotting process of like, oh, I don't want to go into the like icky, gritty details of like forensics and like murder. That's like, this is a puzzle. Let's not think too hard about the fact that a man's been killed. Like, you know. So it's been really fun though, because then every time I come up with like a weird detail, I'm like, this makes me happy. Like, this is funny and weird. So anyway.
Did you think it would go that way?
I had the sense, just based on the premise alone, that it would be a lighter hearted story. And so I wasn't expecting it to really be a drama, but what I didn't expect was that like it would be, you know, full sort of lighthearted, cozy more than anything else. So one of these days I'm going to write my gritty story, but today is not that day. We're just having fun and goofing off, and it centers on kind of life in local business, which is something I'm deeply acquainted with. I know a lot about because I spent a lot of years in local business. So it's really fun to pull on those details of like how sort of bizarre the world of local business can be, and just having a lot of fun with that. So yeah, I kind of knew it would be lighter hearted. I didn't know how much more I would be like, I really like the fun details and the funny stuff over anything else.
Well, I'm looking forward to whatever you write. But now I prefer the non-gritty, but you know what? In for a penny, in for a pound.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate you.
Even if I'm screaming.
So with that said, let's go ahead, and we've had plenty of chit chat about me and my drafting. Let's go ahead and dive into our overview for Sit in Chocolate and get the people ready for what they're going to get for the next 3 weeks. But before we go there, Dana, would you hit us with a summary?
Yes, I will. K.F. Breene's Sin and Chocolate is the first book in the Demigods of San Francisco series, an urban fantasy romance that blends gritty survival, found family, and a broody demigod love interest. The story follows Alexis, a woman scraping by in San Francisco's neutral magical zone while protecting her 2 wards, Daisy and Mordecai. Her life changes when she crosses paths with Kyrian, the sinfully powerful son of a ruthless demigod ruler. And Lexi has a rare power he's been looking for to save his mother. The book delivers a slow burn romance, high stakes magic, sharp humor, and deep emotional bonds, all while setting up a series-long couple whose relationship unfolds across 6 books.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So tell me, just kind of like at the high level, what are some of the things you want to talk about to kind of get the people ready for the next few weeks? What are some of those high level things?
Oh my goodness. Okay, we talked about some things in joint, so I'm just going to do a little blend. I think one of the things that we'll maybe just talk about a little bit, just a reminder of the genre. I think this is a little bit different from what we've read, but at the same time, right along the lines of what we've been doing, if not like emerging, because I think that spills over a lot into the other things, which is like maybe having a little bit of a conversation about the magic system and the fact that this is a slow burn romance. We also are going to talk a little bit about the point of view that K.F. Breene, I wish I knew her first name, but we're just going to go ahead with K.F. Breene. Because it's like, it feels weird. Because you can't just say K.F., you know what I mean? But the point of view that she selected.
Call her K.
Okay.
No, that's even
no,
weirder.
because it is. We're also going to talk, just as a little bit reminder, about this is a multi-book series. And so it's something that you will mention later in the recordings about how a lot of times in fantasy that there are trilogies. Now you're seeing that a lot in romantasy as well, right? In these types of stories where it's typically 3-4 books, but it's not as common to have 6. Right, with the same
6
couple.
Is kind of an unusual number, yeah.
It is, and this is an older book, and that might be why, because it's a lot to pull off. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then finally maybe touch on just a little bit when it comes to antagonism in the story because even though it is a part of a 6-book series and it is a continuation of the same couple and the escalation of the plot, it does sort of bookend really well with the book one. And we do have the antagonist that sort of has a very unique, I guess, presence in the story.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's go ahead and start by talking about, because this book is, I don't see this super often, and I'm quite curious about when you would sort of deploy this type of point of view, but this story uses first and third person point of view. So Lexi's point of view is in first person, and Kieran's point of view is in third person. Can you talk a little bit about, like, how common is that in romance to do sort of like female first person, male third person, and what are the sort of relative like pros and cons of doing something like that?
Y'all, she hit me with these. Y'all, listen. Listen, you know what I think.
I told you I was going to ask about this. I told you I was going to ask this question. I was like, just so you know.
This is when you look right into the camera. Listen.
Linda, honey.
Listen. Y'all, I don't know Kay and Breene's mind. However, when you think about point of view, it's very rare that there is a split in point of view. Yeah. But I would say that I have seen it in other aspects of fantasy, right? So it's not as common in romance. Now, my thoughts as to why she did it, who knows? But to me, I really think about why, more so not Lexi's point of view, because being in first person is very common, at least now it is. But third person, to me, I feel like it has a sense of being like what he is, a demigod, right? Yeah. So it's almost, it opens the world. I think it also shields us from some of the details that he may not be ready to divulge just yet, that you would naturally probably have in your mind as a first person narrative. And so I think what it does is give it a different feel and a tone, and it sort of changes the dynamic of how we interact and engage with the rooms that they're in. And we don't have as many chapters from his point of view as we do from hers. Yeah. But when we do, it is this sort of, I don't want to say all encompassing, but it's almost a broader perspective. And as a reminder, like he's a demigod, right? And I kind of feel like, just a little bit, that it would have been a lot more, like we would have had been a lot more emotions, if not sadness, if it would have been first person from his point of view. Yeah. Because the dynamic between the state in which he's in when we find him in this book and the nature of his magic and his being, it probably would have been a lot of like churning, you know, kind of like when he was having those moments when he was sitting by the ocean. And so with that said, I think part of it could be also controlling. I mean, let me back up just a little bit. Part of this, when you are selecting POV 2, is really understanding what is the type of tone and feel that you want to have, and how do you want to sort of yield that as the writer, right? And part of this, if it would have been in first person from his point of view, there would have been, it would have taken something that was already, it could be probably tethering on being a little bit on the darker side because of the way her magic plays and the way it progresses. But it really would have gone into an area of a little bit of a darker scope because of his mental state and his heart state, because of the nature of his relationship with his mom and his father, right? So I think part of that too. But I think overall it's like getting the bigger scope. And no, it's not common. I would not recommend it. In general, I would normally steer my clients away from that choice, which is why I was really curious about, like, why you might do something like that and when, because I was pretty sure, I was like, this doesn't look familiar, and normally mishmashing points of view is kind of a risky move. It is, and I think a lot of times we just got to remember, I think this book was done 10 years ago, so, right? I think it was 2014.
Maybe more like 8.
Really?
2014 was her first book, or I don't know if it was her first book, but one of her early books. And then this book was like 2018.
2017. Yeah. But yeah,
But
I'm
still,
looking right now.
I mean, it's 2025 now, so not an insignificant amount of time ago, especially in the indie space, right? I mean, because things change pretty rapidly, and pretty often, and so that's
it's 2018. I would also say that I think the fact that I don't know how many. You don't really have a lot of books now where you have gods and demons, or you know what I mean. But at the same time, there was a time when you had in urban fantasy that was a lot more popular, right? So yeah, so I think that's what I have to say about it. It's not common. I would not recommend it. It makes it a harder story to tell. If you do to make the decision, I would have a really concrete reason why you would want to make that sort of choice for your story, because you can risk sort of confusing your readers a little bit. Because it does sort of not whiplash, but it kind of feels like, oh, that's different.
Yeah,
to go from first
just
person to
not
third.
used to it, right? We're used to generally like point of view consistency. So like if you're having multiple point of views, you either have everybody in first person or everybody in third person. Like that's what we're more used to. So it can be a bit jarring to be in first person and then swap out to third person, and you feel like, oh, I guess we're doing this,
Exactly.
But it's interesting because Kieran has very few, I think we are in his point of view maybe 5 times in the whole book, versus the rest of the book being from Lexi's point of view. So they kind of like drop in at sort of these major moments in the story, and so we also get. And I think that helps temper some of that jarring experience, because if it was like, you think about, you do like his POV, her POV, his POV, her POV, and you do that back and forth. If we were ping-ponging like that a lot throughout the book, it probably would be a little bit like, it would feel more jarring because you're doing it more often.
Yeah, and I think the greater good of having the sort of limited chapters from his point of view comes in as far as our exposure to his world. Right? Because a lot of that, you want to get into the world a little bit more before we start getting into the details. And so it really does almost primarily center around her world and him coming into her world in this book.
Yeah, for sure. And so this is, of course, the first book of a 6-book series, and this book features one couple. So it is like Kieran and Lexi through the whole thing. And so that makes this also a super duper slow burn. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Y'all ain't nothing to talk about other than it is a slow burn. But what I can say is, as we get into the story, you're going to see how that plays out, right? That even though it is a slow burn, so that we can see that relationship progress across those 6 books, we do find that in this book, their attraction and their chemistry, the moment they're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's either on or it's like white hot or it's fire. Like it's just, it's there. And so you're going to see that even though it is a slow burn, and the fact that they're having this wrestling as to whether they want to work together, it just really fuels the fact of the progression of that relationship towards being something that's much deeper than even the moment of them working together.
Yeah.
Right, it's much deeper than that, which is why we're here for it. But it is. So it is a slow burn. And you'll also see that I think, again, whenever you have a slow burn, I think it's really important to make sure that those other threads of your story are really locked and loaded, because it may feel like they're doing a bunch of nothingness. And that doesn't happen here, right? You have the progression of her goals as well as his, the introduction to this world and the magic that is involved here, and her limited understanding of how that works, even though she's in fact a part of that world. Right. And so while we're doing this, we never lose sight of the fact that there is romantic chemistry there, or romantic tension. And that's important. It's just they don't carry it out fully until later.
Yeah, no, this book is such a great example. And we'll talk about this, in the coming episodes, of like, this is such a good example of having a multi-book series that features the same couple, because again, what we've read so far is one book, one couple. So everything happens within the one book. And this book really like introducing those steamy promises through the language and using the magic to like let us know it's gonna get hot, it's gonna get heavy, but not yet, and so you have that promise and you have some of that delivery without fully delivering on it, because again, we got 6 whole books to go, like we need somewhere to go. And this being a great first, like seeing them basically get established in the first stage of like relational development by the end of the book, which is really just tenuously accepting that we're working together. It's just a really, really great example of how to sort of pace out a relationship over multiple books and what that can look like in that first book, especially. Again, delivering on some of that steam, delivering on some of that heat, but keeping it very slow burn and leaving plenty of space for that to develop over multiple books.
And to keep us engaged as the reader, especially if you're a romance reader, right? To keep us really engaged. And we don't lose that. We don't lose it because the two of them are just there. It's a really great pairing.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to see, if you will, behind the veil, right? Because part of this is that there is such a big difference between the two of them that it's almost like we're given time to believe.
Yeah.
On top of wrapping our heads around the suspension of belief. And it's done. And so as you progress through the next couple of episodes, we'll talk about it more. But I think that's just something that you don't want to forget, that this is the first book and it's a really great setup of the status quo, especially for Alexis. And Kieran is already on this path and has already created this plan. And we don't know the fullness of it even by the end of the book. We just know a little, but we do know that he's really intentional and is being very secretive, if you will, about how he's going about doing it. And this just begins the process of planting the seeds that will come to harvest later.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important about this, that slow burn is letting us know that there's more to come, but not just that. It's all the other little things that are happening as we move through that are going to pull us through the 6 books. And so, yeah, I think it makes for a great balance. And the nature of her relationship with her wards and what we see of the dynamic of them. And it just feels it out in a way that just feels like you're luxuriating in this book.
Yeah.
You're not trying to rush it. You want to know what's happening, so you don't want to stop reading, but you really are luxuriating in this world. I don't know if that's really a real word, y'all, but I say it all the time, so we just gonna go ahead and just...
I'm like 99% sure it is. I'm like
pretty
sure it is.
Listen, I appreciate it.
We're gonna get that guy in the comments and like, well, actually, he's just gonna come tell us what's what. But it is what's really interesting is that this is such a good book one, because to your point, we have lots of books to go, so lots of space to get into the details, but the plot is tight. We are delivering on, we are moving this thing forward. They're butting heads, they're coming into contact with each other. Lexi is pursuing her goals scene after scene, moving closer and closer towards sort of this inevitable collision with Kieran and with what Kieran wants and what Kieran needs, while also, trying to solve the problem of, caring for her wards. And along the way, what's really impressive, I think, about this as a book one is it is chocked full of setups for the next 5 books.
Yeah.
But still closes the central loop of this particular story. We are following kind of this one progression, and then all along the way, we are meeting those little setups. So we know that there are threads that we're going to get to see more of, without it feeling like we get to the end of the book and it feels like an open, that the loops are open in a way where we feel dissatisfied. Because we see, the book follows a single plot all the way through and then gives us all of these tasty little threads that we're going to get to pick through as we go through the story. And that's not always easy to do, introducing potential threads that we're excited to see more of, and not having it feeling like oh, that feels like a promise that didn't get delivered on. You know, like that's not always an easy kind of line to walk.
Yeah, but even as we talk about this, because, and y'all, this is the overview, but I think the biggest part of what we're talking about right now is understanding that at the end of the day, this is a book one, and this is essentially the act one, right? And this is the status quo of her world, because we're already realizing that we're going to get limited exposure to his world. So therefore, a lot of what we're seeing is the nature of her relationship with her wards and him sort of coming in and out of that dynamic. Yeah. Right. And her attempting to remedy a situation and not having the source or the means, and his presence sort of colliding with that needed to, right, and disrupting that need to sort of remedy that situation with Mordecai. And so that's what kind of allows us to sort of stretch this moment, but really being concrete in like what her original plan was to sort of remedy this, and how it succeeds or does not, and what happens after that, and what causes them to agree, even if reluctantly, to continue on this journey together. And it also gives us a great opportunity to meet them and get an understanding of their dynamic as individuals, but also together.
Yeah.
And so that's just what I put in my notes is like what you're saying, like, you know, the open loops are just as juicy as the book, right? Yeah. Like of what is to come. And you sort of have this almost a quintessential fantasy book of this person that believes they're ordinary, but they're extremely special and very rare. Yeah. And she doesn't know that, and she'll soon find out, but he knows it. So he sort of plays almost like, now I'm thinking about like this role of hero, but also mentor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
Antagonist to her world.
Big time. He's basically, even though we get introduced that like Valens is our arching antagonist for the series, in this book, Kieran is really our antagonist for this book, because he is... Right, he's chasing her down, she's trying to get away from him, and she just can't seem to shake him, right?
But she's so curious about him, and she's still attracted to him whether she wants to say it or not.
There's no getting around, he's hot, so this is already just...
tropes. Possessive, obsessive, stalker, you know, all that stuff. But in a non-stalkery kind of way, depending on who you ask. Because if you ask Mordecai, he's a stalker.
He's a stalker.
But it makes it for great. And then you also get an introduction to his wound, and sort of like the lengths that he's gone to so far to also try to remedy those which have not been successful for him. So we have this person who has access to everything, has money, has power, has strength, has access, but cannot solve this thing. And he needs her to do it. And it's a leveler. Right? It's a leveler in this dynamic, but also in their relationship that sort of humbles him and sort of gives her this sort of courage where she didn't have it before. And then in the middle, they begin to find who they truly are and how they can truly, like, it's the foundation of the blossoming of this relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, you know, I just want to comment really quick because I was just thinking about this sort of like ordinary but special. And this is really common in romantic fantasy in particular. And I think you'll even see it in urban fantasy as well. There's that overlap between them anyway. But there's this this cliche sometimes about the female lead who's like, what? I've never done a thing in my life. I'm gonna train with daggers and bows and arrows, and I'm apparently the chosen one, right? And it's just sort of like, you know, there's really nothing. She's a nothing character, but somehow she's the chosen one, and you're just kind of like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. But I think that K.F. Breene did a really nice job of like evading that like trope. And I say trope, I use that like trope in a negative sense because it is like people feel like, ew, like this isn't like I don't buy it. Like it just sort of feels like, you know, not very, again, almost more like cliche. And I think K.F. Breene does a really good job of getting around that because Lexi knows about her power, but she just doesn't think that it does anything that important, because no, she's never had any occasion. Like, she grew up in the crack between the societies, because that's where her mom lived, and so she didn't have anyone to tell her about her powers. But she knows that she has the power, and she knows basically what it is. She has a level of understanding of what it does and how she can use it. But it has kind of like a mental and emotional cost to using it, which is why she doesn't like to. And so what it does is it's giving us all of these kind of plausible reasons why she wouldn't really know how to use her power. She isn't aware of how powerful she really is. And to open up for her to get to learn more about her power and understand how truly rare she is, without having that, like, again, that kind of goofy female cliche of, like, she's just some random girl, she's like, I guess I'm special, you know. So I think that that's not always easy to, when you have a lead with a rare power, it's not always easy to dodge around that trope. But Lexi is so involved in her own life and trying to solve her damn problems, like, because they just keep coming, and she's just trying to make the dang thing work. That you never get that feeling off of her. She's very, like, I'm gonna solve the problem, like, I've got to put food on the table, like, forget about my stupid superpower, like, I need food on the table for my kids and medicine for my sick ward. And so we're seeing her as very engaged and very, like, sort of passionately pursuing something, and we just completely evade that kind of that pitfall that sometimes you can fall into.
Yeah, and one of the things is, like, as you go through the story, it's almost like, what are all the ways that sort of limits her access to resources, right? Versus him having this limitless. Yeah. I think it's a very interesting dynamic between opposites attract, right? Which is a huge trope in romance. And how it, on one hand, can help, but also they can want nothing to do with it. And because for everything that this entire story, she's trying to hide. She has a lot to hide. Yeah. And it's been the nature of how she's lived her entire life. And this would expose her in so many ways. And she just doesn't even realize it. And I really love the thought that the way that it is set up, she is trying to hide that she can be exposed in so many different ways. And us as the reader are beginning to understand how exposed she is. Yeah. Even if she doesn't realize it yet. And I think that's something else that helps with that readability and that read through. Yeah. Right? Of, like, we know enough. We don't know everything. We know enough to be curious, and the open loops, again, are just there. But we also are starting to understand, to be able to count the costs based on what she has revealed, and starting to get an understanding of what they're up against and the stakes. And that always sets us up, especially if we really like them and we want them to win. Yeah, absolutely. And we already touched on this a little bit, but just to make sure that we hit it, as a part of the overview, we are looking at really an urban fantasy. But it plays like a romantic fantasy, right? Where you're like romance first, fantasy second. Is there anything you just sort of want to say about what genre we're in and where this is positioned? I think one of the things, this is when paying attention to when the book was released is so important. Yeah. We were going back and forth. It was 2014, 2018, but it was in 2018. And the reality is, you had romantic fantasy, but you didn't have romantasy, and it wasn't as popular as it is now. So sure. I would say that this was one of the very first that really opened the door. And we see this in a way that we didn't. Again, I don't want to point back out, but to be really cruel, right? Of, like, from the up front, we see that romantic tension, while also seeing those stakes and the action that could be potential in the story. And so I think leading with that is almost a precursor to what we begin to see, except for some of them get a little bit more fantasy than this. Her placing this in a modern sort of environment and making it contemporary is a little bit more different, but it does help us to understand like what's going on. And so I would say that even though now we could probably classify this as a romantic fantasy or romantasy, then it would have probably been again classified as a romantic or an urban fantasy, romantic urban fantasy. And looking at the pairing of the two, that we are introduced to that romance, and then as we move forward, begin to first with our exposure to the environment, and then starting to get an understanding of who Kyrian is and who he sees in her, even if she doesn't know who Kyrian is.
Yeah.
Of what are the true stakes that are at play in this world. And so yes, I would say then it would have been urban fantasy. Now I think you would call it a romantic fantasy or romantasy, interchangeably.
Yeah, and it really does have that, again, this, this when we think about urban fantasy, we think about the fantasy element getting layered into a world that we generally recognize. And so since we are in, but it's interesting, yeah, because now that you mention it, urban fantasy isn't as popular as it was 7-8 years ago. Because I'm even thinking about like urban fantasy in like not romance, but in fantasy, right? Like it's
in general. Exactly.
We certainly still have it, but it's not having its heyday. Sort of like the same way that like dystopian had its heyday, right? In the, I don't know, I guess that would have been like 2010s. Maybe very end of the early 2000s and into the 2010s. I'm a little hazy on the timeline there, but right, there's this time when dystopian in particular was like very popular, right? The Hunger Games came onto the scene, and then everyone was into the Hunger Games, and then we had there were a lot of other books that actually already existed that people were now picking up because they got a taste for dystopian and they wanted more. And so urban fantasy kind of had this moment as well, in on the romance side and on the just fantasy side, but now we don't see as much of that urban fantasy as we did 5-6 years ago. And so this could, I think, plays like romantic fantasy. It's got that romance first and fantasy second.
And that's why I think it was one of the earlier ones, along with a couple of others. But I would say, like, keep that in mind, because I think she not plays it off, because that's not her intent, but it blends really well because she leads with a romance.
Yeah, she definitely does.
And it's a strong thread. And as you go on into the external world and the magic and how it works and how and the powers that he has and the powers that she have and how they affect each other gets stronger and stronger as you move into the series.
Yeah, and I think this is why this feels more like romantic fantasy than even urban fantasy in some ways, is because it's more fantasy than urban. Like, it's San Francisco, but it is like unrecognizable San Francisco, except geographically, right? And I think that's why this feels like it's teetering right on the edge of, like, feeling like romantasy, because it's so magical. Like, the magic is so at the forefront that it doesn't feel like, because usually urban fantasy, you'll see, like, you'll have more of that, like, recognizable, right? You think about Ninth House, where it's like still clearly Yale and still clearly 2019, like, this is where we are, but there's like this magical element, but because we sort of have magic at the forefront, and now magical people sort of like owning the space, rather than being in secret, it looks more like a fantasy than an urban environment. And so I think that's kind of, it's just interesting to kind of see and pick that out a little bit and see why it feels that way.
And I think it's the blend. I think it's the blend, and that's why now, number one, that it's still popular. It's still a popular book. It still ranks really well. I'm looking right now, and it's still in the top. It's 2,305 in the overall store. It's in the top 20 in the entire store. And this book was 7 years old.
Yeah.
So
7 years old.
Yeah. So and I believe the series is done. She's not adding to it. That kind of gives it a little, juice. but I think it still stands. And it's because even when those areas are brought to the forefront, there is, she's very clear about them. And I think it's the fact that she's weaving all of that into the action that moves the story forward, into what's bringing the plot forward. So it's sort of threaded together in a way that's inseparable, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes for a very interesting read. I think it is a great setup. You find two people who shouldn't be together, who are also perfect for each other, and have something to win and also something to lose.
Yeah.
That plays significantly on the story. And the fact that we sort of have this presence that's looming out in the distance that doesn't make a full cameo on the page is important, but it also sets us up for we have more stories to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, do you have any other notes or any other last comments you wanted to make for our overview of Sin and Chocolate before we wrap our podcast for the day?
We sort of mentioned it, but I think one of the things to keep in mind, I think that also allows the story to really move, especially with us having the limited access to Kyrian, is the fact that each one of them have their own goals when they come into the story. And we sort of mentioned it, but I think that's a really interesting place to hang a hook, right? Or hang something on, which is each of them having those goals, make it so that in this book, we really are exploring what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. What are they willing to do? How bad is it? What are the true stakes? And it sort of, again, sets the tone. Mm-hmm. And how this relationship is a disruptor to the plans that they have, and how it exposes both of them in ways they can't perceive at this stage, and it makes it, that's what the part that makes it juicy, right? Because we're staring, we're on the outside looking in, and so by the time you pull it all together, you really do have something that it's listed as over 400 pages, but it's a fast, a pretty tight story, and a really nicely paced story, and something that you really can sink your teeth into and look forward to the next book.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, get excited for the next 3 weeks of our discussion of Sin and Chocolate by K.F. Breene. This is one of those overlap picks, so it is very much, again, romance forward, but we also have a really strong fantasy element at work in the story as well. So we're kind of we're kind of crossing over Dana's expertise and mine as well. So we have so much to talk about: plot, characters, and then those big takeaways. So get excited. If you haven't picked up the book, you absolutely should go ahead and grab it. You can always learn something from these podcasts if you haven't read the book, but you will get so much more out of it if you have, and you have a week to read it. You can totally read this book in a week. So if you haven't grabbed it, go ahead, get on your local bookstore or Amazon or Barnes & Noble or whatever your jam is, and pick it up, and we will be back next week to talk about the plot of this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a review, a comment if you have questions. All the nice happy buttons, just push all of them, make sure you get notifications and all the good stuff, and we will be back next week to talk plot. But until then, as always, happy writing.
Happy writing.